Hey everybody, here's another episode of Video Game Collectors on Call. Today we're going to take kind of a detour maybe from video game collecting per se, and I have the owner of Video Game Restoration with me. How's it going today, man?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So I'm glad you could join me. We've kind of been working on getting this to work out, I think, for a couple months now, but I'm glad you could make it. So
Busy schedules, I guess.
yeah, yeah. So tell me about, obviously you own kind of website or I don't know if it's a company, would you say maybe?
That's yeah, it's a good question. It literally just started off as like a username, and then it kind
Okay.
of evolved into a company over the course of a couple of years. Just a small business, I guess.
Okay. And tell me about when it started and how it started.
I'd say like most other TikTokers, especially in the retro game world, it started as something to kind of kill the boredness or the mundaneness maybe of COVID, as a lot of us had free time and you couldn't go anywhere. So I saw a video from a creator on YouTube called Odd Tinkering, and he restored a Game Boy Advance. Which was like the same kind of Game Boy Advance I grew up with. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. So I put a request out on Facebook just asking if anybody had any old consoles that they were like willing to let me play with. And I got a few people and was able to restore them, and I just posted them on TikTok thinking, it's like, oh, other people might like this, and it kind of just grew from there.
Do you just show the beginning and the end product, or are you showing people how you fix them so that they can maybe try it at home or give it a
I
go?
try to do a little bit of both. I try to show like the process. I do kind of intentionally leave parts out. My main goal is to show that these things are repairable, and that they're not always like, because like e-waste is a big thing obviously, and that these things are like have a lot of historical value in my opinion. So rather than them going to a landfill, I'd like to see people fix them, or at least reach out to folks that can fix them. So because I mostly do short form videos, I tried the here's a step-by-step process, but I would ended up leaving out a lot because I'd have to fit it in within 60 seconds to sometimes 3 minutes. And then people were like, oh, I tried this, but this happened, or like, I'd get like people in the comments be like, this isn't proper at all. So I just try to show this can happen. If you want to learn more, look it up. There's like tons of resources.
So do you have any kind of background in like electrical engineering, or is it just something you've learned by watching YouTube videos? How did you learn to do all this?
My background's in medicine, so I guess I just kind of have like a steady hand for it. But my dad was a tinkerer, so like growing up, if a toy broke, he'd be like, "Let's take it apart. Let's find out how it works." So that's how we started that process, and then just kind of like over the years, like working on cars, like just like on my own as a hobby, and learning how like electrical things work. I think the first electrical thing I made was a pair of Splinter Cell goggles for a Halloween costume, where I like turned them on and all that stuff. They glowed green. So drawing
That's
up the
awesome.
schematics and learning how that works was kind of like my
Are you
entry.
a big Splinter Cell fan then? Is that
Heck yeah.
I wish, I read recently they're going to bring one of them back. They're making a remake, I think, but I love the multiplayer on Splinter Cell. There's nothing
Yeah, it
like
was
it.
great. And like I've heard those rumors too, like, and it seems like every few years or so they come up, they're like, yep, new Splinter Cell's coming out, and then it just kind of
Yeah.
fades away. So maybe
Psych.
with
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed going back to its like stealth origins, we might see the reemergence of stealth games again.
Yeah, there really wasn't any game like it, where you have someone as a mercenary, someone as a spy, and you have different objectives, and just to play
Yeah.
that kind of game was just cool and really really unique in that day and age.
Yeah.
So, what about the customers you get? Are these people from all over the world? Are they usually local? Are there a lot from all over? What's the customer base you get?
I'd say the majority of them are from the United States. Like I'm up in Canada, so the furthest one away I've done is Lebanon. I've had folks from Ireland, the UK, Puerto Rico, as far west as Alaska. So just kind of like all over, but mostly the states. And if you look at my viewership or the statistics of it, the majority of my viewership is in the United States. So that kind of adds up as to how most people find me. When it comes to local
Gotcha.
repairs, I'm somewhat known in the area. I don't really advertise locally, but almost every single local repair I do is like an HDMI repair or like stick drift, just like those modern consoles.
Do you do this out of your home, or you have an actual place where all these repairs get done, like another building?
Just in my basement. It's just like a
Oh,
little
okay.
workbench in the corner of my basement.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what would be the process? Let's say someone's watching this and they're like, "Man, I have a Nintendo 64 that doesn't work." How do they go about getting a hold of you or sending it to you to get it fixed?
So there's two methods. Usually for international, I prefer people use my website, so videogamerestoration.com. There's a little contact form. You kind of fill in a blurb of what's going on. But then I also have a Facebook business page where you just like direct message me, be like, "Hey, I have this issue with whatever issue or with whatever system rather." Those are like the main two ways of getting a hold of me.
And the price of this?
I try to do most of them for free if I
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
So the only things I don't really do for free now are HDMI repairs, and that's just as like it'll teach you to be a little nicer to your system. And if word got out that I did free HDMI repairs, I think I'd be overwhelmed. In Game Boy modding, so if it's a true restoration, I try to do it for free because that's like restoring someone's kind of childhood. But if it's like, oh, I found this at a yard sale and I want it modded, I'm like, okay, well, that's not as high up on my priority list of things.
Yeah, yeah, it's more of a cosmetic thing as opposed to a let's actually get it to work. Is there anything people ask you, hey, can you fix this? And you're like, no, no way.
I avoid PS3s.
Why is that? Any reason?
They're notoriously difficult, at least in my opinion. And a lot of the problem is the yellow light of death. And I know there is repairs out there. I personally don't know them, and I think it's just a little bit beyond my skill level. And because they're so big, when people look at like shipping them out, it's like shipping bricks. So like the cost of shipping would be outrageous. And for something that I might not be able to repair, or sometimes a repair that's only temporary, I don't want people spending like close to $100 maybe both ways.
Right.
For something that might not work.
So do you fix more modern consoles as well? Like if someone had a Switch that wasn't working? Yep. I mean, I don't know many people who have a broken Switch, but well,
it's probably one of the most common.
Really?
Yeah,
what's a common thing that gets broken on a Switch?
The charge port's probably the most common thing. There's like stick drift or Joy-Con drift, and then the charge port, because especially with Switch Lites, because you mix handhelds capabilities with children, and it's just bound to go wrong, right? Like the amount of like toilet switches I've had requests for, where like, oh, my kid was playing a Switch and dropped it in the toilet.
Okay.
Or like they plug it in while they're playing it, and then they move around, or they put it on the bed and it bends the port, breaks the port.
What are some common things you see in older systems, like maybe an NES or a Super Nintendo, like some things that commonly are wrong?
I'd say honestly the most common thing in retro systems is that they're just dirty a lot of the time. Those machines just know how to last. Like an N64, I don't think I've yet to come across an N64 with an actual issue that couldn't be fixed by just cleaning. Outside of like someone breaking it themselves, kind of like either trying to mod it themselves or they poured water on it. But these old systems, like, and if it's not that, a lot of the times it's capacitors. Now there is always like a few systems have like their own little quirks. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Outside of like the capacitors cleaning dimensions, I guess. But yeah, I'd say that's the majority of them. So like when people want to get into this, I usually recommend it like, well, just start with retro systems, a bottle of alcohol, and a toothbrush, and you'll go pretty far.
Okay. So you do consoles as well as like maybe handhelds like Game Boys and things too?
Yep, if it's anything video game related outside of CDs, I can do it, just because a CD you need a resurfacer. I don't have one of those.
Yeah, no resurfacer. So like cartridge games like Nintendo 64 and NES, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I have your Superman game, unfortunately, which I couldn't save, and it like. Ugh.
I didn't want to bring that up. Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up, but yeah, I did. Essentially, how I first found you was to get you to fix one of my Sega Genesis games, which was a Super Nintendo game, which I bought at a conference, a video game conference, and thought that obviously it should work. I mean, this guy seems like he's a legitimate seller, and I brought it home and plugged it in, and it didn't work at all. But you did say you managed to get it to the title. What was it? The title screen, or you got it somewhere?
The licensing screen.
That's the licensing screen. Okay, I didn't even get that. So.
Oh, really? But I tried. What I tried with it is, like, obviously first cleaning it, because that's 9 times out of 10. When I took it apart, it looked super clean, so I tried reflowing it, because a lot of the time when solder gets old, we call it a cold solder joint, it cracks, so you just reflow it. Tried that didn't work. I tried...
so for those of us who aren't into, like, electrician stuff, so when you say resaw, so you're connecting the circuits and stuff, essentially, like, with heat and
exactly.
molten
so
metal.
If you're familiar with welding, I guess, too, it kind of be similar. So the pin goes through a little hole that has metal through it, and then you just basically seal it with liquid metal, and when it cools, it hardens.
Gotcha.
Eventually, sometimes that cracks and the connection's broken. So yeah, I tried reflowing it. I tried pulling the chip off to see if there's any trace damage or like the electrical pathways that are damaged. Nothing. And then as a last ditch effort, I got one of my own Sega Genesis games. I pulled the chip off that and I put the chip on it. So like, okay, this board is known to be good. And when I tested it, it didn't work. So the chip itself is toast. And that one's
so explain to us what the difference between a chip and a board is.
Yeah, of course. So the chip is basically what stores the physical game. So a board would just be like a circuit board, like that green...
The green thing you see.
The green thing, yeah. That just basically allows signals and electrical... It's like electrical pathways and signals to travel from one point to the board to us. So like say the pins, it'll start at the pin, it'll go to the chip, and then maybe to a resistor or capacitor, and then go back out to the system. And basically the system's looking for the data, and it comes back through and it has the data in there. So without the chip, the board is useless. And kind of vice versa, I guess, but boards can easily be replaced. Chips are kind of, once the chip's broken, it's gone.
So chips would be more specific to like a game, right? Because you said you interchanged a board and a chip, but if that would have worked, would it have played the Superman game or would it have played the game that you switched it with?
It would have played the Superman game. So think of a
Okay.
chip as like an SD card, maybe.
Okay.
So the game itself is on. Let's say you have an SD card that has Superman and an SD card that had, I think it was, oh my goodness, I think of Sonic. And then you have like an SD card adapter, like from a micro to a big one. Actually, I think I have
Okay.
right here. So like yeah, one of these things right here.
Gotcha.
So let's say this is your chip, or pardon me, your board, and this is your chip. So basically, I essentially pulled the Superman one off, and I put the Sonic one into it, and then I tested it that way.
Gotcha. Well, you win some, you lose some, But I
Yes.
appreciate you taking a look at it. So
Yeah,
I
of
do.
course.
Thanks for that. Anything that you get a lot of that's just like a very easy fix that even people could probably easily do at home. Something specific.
N64 are usually one of the easiest systems
Like
because, yeah, the console. Usually because it just needs a cleaning again. So like one of the most common issues I see is no audio or no video, and a lot of the time that's just the jumper pack needs to be cleaned. So when I get those requests, I usually don't accept it until they try that, because I hate to see someone ship it all the way for me to just clean.
Yeah.
Like, yep, it's good. Here it is. All right.
so how do we clean those if we have that issue?
So with the jumper pack, just pull the jumper pack out. You get a Q-tip, an alcohol swab. You basically clean the pins on the inside, run them back and forth. And then what I like to do is I'll kind of like soak it, like put a lot of alcohol on it, and I'll put it back in the system, pull it out, put it back in the system, pull it out. And that's basically cleaning the pins inside the console as well. And then pull it out, wait 30 seconds for the alcohol to dry up, pop it in and try it again. And then do the same thing with the game cartridge and even the AV port.
Is that similar if maybe you had to take a console completely apart and sort of clean the insides of it? Would you recommend the same like alcohol and things
absolutely. Yeah, if you're confident in being able to take those apart, that's probably the best way. So you could easily access everything. And then like when you have the pins like out and exposed, you can get a toothbrush and scrub them in there as well.
We talked about the hardest thing to fix was the PlayStation 3.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, in your opinion, how often are you not successful in fixing a game or a console?
Good question.
50% of the time?
No, it's
like,
definitely, I fix more than 50%.
Yeah.
I want to say like 80%. I have a pretty good success rate, and I think a lot of that is just luck, though. Quite honestly, like I see people like get into this. They're like, "Hey, I had this problem," and they're explaining it. I'm like, "Man, I don't know." It's like that one's wild, right? It's like I haven't encountered that. It's like unfortunately, this person's just starting off, but a pretty good success rate, I think. That being said, though, a lot of them are like kind of HDMI repairs, or just you do one, you've done 100 of them, kind of things.
What is the wildest thing that someone has asked you to fix before?
Like,
do you have one in mind?
System or just like damage wise?
Let's do both. Let's do damage wise first, and then rarity of system or device. Okay. Yeah.
Damaged. Good question.
Yeah.
I've had a toilet switch.
Okay. Like, did someone throw a Nintendo in a wood chipper or something and say, "Hey, can you fix this?"
I'd love the challenge.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything too dramatic when it comes to like physical damage. A lot of it's just like HDMI ports that are ripped out and stuff like that, which
Gotcha.
are a bummer to fix, but they're all right. I can't think of anything off the top of my head of like looking at
what about
like, uh-oh.
What about the most expensive then? Is there an item that is very
expensive?
Yeah.
I think would be I did a Neo Geo Pocket Gold, I think it was.
Okay.
Which was a very niche, it lasted. There's not many of them out there. It was a flopped system, and I took it on. Geez, it was like, I still have it. It's done. I just need to send it back now. But I took it on probably like 2 years ago.
Don't worry, if it's yours, he's going to send it back soon.
Yeah, I've been in contact with him, so he knows. It was to the difficulty of repair. Like, one, because, like, if I ever do anything wrong, if I've caused physical damage in a system somehow, I fix it, replace it. So, like, one time I was trying to fix a controller and I knocked something. So I bought an entirely new parts controller, which was like $60 just to replace that one part, just because I'm like, no, that's my damage.
Yeah.
But with the Neo Geo, like, they're $700, and they rarely come up online. So I ended up doing as much as I could, but I couldn't finish it, and sending it off to someone named Solder King, who's over in the States, way more experienced than me. And he was able to find the little issues that I couldn't, and he fixed it up. But that's probably the most expensive system. I'm like just nervous all the time, every time I'm working on it. So.
Is that like your biggest success story as well, from something you fixed where you were like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, and then you fixed it? Or
because I didn't completely fix it, I'd say no. It was definitely one of the most humbling in like learning, because like I can't remember the wave. There's a statistic, or a chart rather, and I can't remember the name, but basically it's like kind of like when you enter, your confidence is like way up, like your confidence shoots up, and then you basically get humbled and it crashes down. So like I took that
Okay.
at the peak of like I'm doing great, I'm so great at this, and it literally crashed me right down. As like maybe I'm not as experienced as I thought. And I learned a lot from it, so I did what I could, and then so like obviously it was saved. So I think the charging chip was broken or blown, and the battery was dead. And when I fixed
Gotcha.
that, I tore a trace because it was the first time I'd really worked on really small circuitry. So I sent it off to Solder King, and he was able to repair those little traces there.
Gotcha. You mentioned earlier too about modding systems. That's something you do. What kind of prices do you charge for that if someone has a console they want you to mod?
So when it comes to modding, it's been a while since I've done one now. The most I'll charge is $50 Canadian. So when I guesstimate, that's probably like $40 to $42.
Yeah, sounds about right.
US. Which I think, in my hope, is under market value because I don't try to really make too much money off that. And that's like a full, like if you gave me a Game Boy and you wanted a new backlit IPS screen, a sound amplifier, a D-hum kit, or like something that basically gets rid of audio interference, like a new shell, new buttons, like pretty much the works, it's going to be $50 Canadian.
What if when I was in college, I remember there was a guy that lived in one of the dorms and he would mod Nintendo Wii's for people where you could play essentially any, Nintendo game ever made. I think it was just like a little SD card. Is
Yeah.
that something you would be able to do too? I imagine you just put the SD card in and that's about it.
I think there's a little more to it. I haven't done them. I've been asked to do them, but technically it's illegal if I'm not mistaken. It might only be illegal to supply the games.
Wow.
That's kind of
Okay.
like your jailbreaking. Just because I have like the business,
Yeah.
my paranoia is like Nintendo's gonna send me one. Be like, is he gonna do it? Like, gotcha.
Yeah. So you do mostly physical mods then as opposed to like software mods, correct?
I do. Yeah. When it comes to
Okay.
software, I'm pretty oblivious in my opinion.
Okay.
Which like if you ever watch a video like I called a partition a file. It's like, oh, the D file's not working, and like the comments ripped me apart. They're like, those are partitions. Like, okay,
Oh
cool.
wow. Well, everyone on the internet's an expert in something, so
Yeah,
that'll happen to you.
but I learned though. So
Good. So just to kind of veer off a little bit, you also play games, I assume. You don't just
yeah,
fix
of
them,
course,
is that correct? So
absolutely.
I see a lot of Zelda stuff. Would you
Oh
say
yeah,
that Zelda is your favorite kind of game franchise, I guess?
absolutely. Ocarina of Time is like my peak game. Like if you're to like, what's my favorite game of all time? Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and I don't know. I think it's because it was the first game I ever played. Then I was just hard onto Zelda ever since. I've played every one since.
Now you mentioned that you probably have a smaller collection than some of the people that have been on my show and things like that. I see some cool stuff behind you, like a power glove and some other things. What's some of the cool stuff that you have in your collection?
That's a good question. Good
Whether it
question.
be
I
a
guess like,
game or a peripheral, like,
yeah.
anything, accessories.
A lot of it is just like decorations. I'm like I've just when I had my own apartment before like getting married and having kids and whatnot. It was just like I just filled my apartment with like nerdy stuff, which I still
Hmm.
hold.
Yeah.
I'd say one of my favorites is definitely the Power Glove. I found that locally. A guy on Facebook just popped it up. It's like full. I haven't tested it, but it has the full set. One of my favorites, funny enough, is just the mechanical arm from Metal Gear Solid 5. And the only reason I think it's like I thought it was cool, and then I went to get it, and they were like, someone was messing with it. It was either GameStop or EB Games at the time. They were messing with it. It's like, oh, somebody bought it, and they were marking it down. So I was like, oh, sweet, like what a perfect deal. So I bought it, and then come to find out, they're super sought after. It just happened to be the store I was at just couldn't sell it, and online they're like $300-$400 now. At least
Is this
that's what I was
it's
told.
just something that came with the game? It's not like you don't use it to play the game. It's just like a
No, it's just
display item.
a display item, yeah.
Okay.
So one of my favorites is like as silly as it is. It's just like I don't know. It's a good find.
So Ocarina is favorite game of all time, or do you have something
Absolutely.
else? Okay. Zelda excluded, favorite game of all time.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna like after the interview, I'll be like, oh no, it would have been this one. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is definitely up there.
Okay.
Huge
I
Assassin's Creed fan.
never got into any of the Assassin's Creeds. I mean, I own one and I played it for maybe 10 minutes and I just didn't get into it. But we were talking earlier about Splinter Cell a little bit, and
Splinter
it's
Cell 2, yeah.
it's kind
Chaos
of got
Theory.
that. Was that the one that was Mercs, the first online multiplayer with
I
Mercs
think it
versus
was, yeah, because it was
spies?
Mercs. I think, yeah, Mercs versus Spies, because then Double Agent had a spy, like you were a team.
Yeah, yeah.
Conviction had like you were a third echelon and a Spetsnaz or something like that, or KGB.
I just like the one where the goal was to hack the computers and then
Yeah.
or kill the spies essentially. Then they threw all these extra stuff in where you got to grab the containers and take them out and remove them or all that. And they I think they made it a little too complicated after a certain amount of time.
I'm pretty sure that's
But
Chaos Theory.
okay,
That was a good
yeah, I
one.
think that was the first one, right? The very first Splinter Cell with multiplayer.
Yes, with multiplayer.
Okay, and then Warehouse I think was one of the levels. Is that right?
I don't know. So like
Taking it,
back then,
I'm taking it back.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't really have online capabilities back then.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
it was just like just parents' finances and just like how much I actually played. Like that's why I think to this day I'm very much like a single player, kind of like
Really?
Assassin's Creed, Bioshock,
Yeah.
Fallout. Like I prefer
That's true. That's
story-driven
true.
game kind of thing. Yeah, but I remember playing it at my buddy's house, and man, it was hard, like super hard.
It was, yeah, but it was definitely fun. For sure. I hope
Absolutely.
they do another one soon for Splinter Cell. So, if you had to choose a multiplayer game, are there any multiplayer games from your past that you enjoyed, or any retro games?
Like online multiplayer or just like multiplayer?
Just local is fine. Yeah.
Oh, definitely GoldenEye.
GoldenEye. Okay, yeah,
Absolutely GoldenEye. Yeah.
definitely a classic. Did you and your friends have a no odd job rule?
No, it was a race to see who got
Or
job
does he would
first.
get odd job first? Okay, so kind of the opposite of some
Yeah.
people. Gotcha.
And if we had someone
Okay.
that was like new to the game, we usually gave them odd jobs. Like, okay, now you get like a bit of a handicap.
Okay,
And if
yeah.
you're the best, it was kind of the challenge to play as Jaws because you're the opposite. You're two-way.
Hardest, yeah, easiest target, and you do like slaps only, and
Yes,
those were such, yeah, those are some fun games. I contend that the N64 is probably, if you're looking for a console that has a lot of games that you can play with friends and really have a good time with, I think Nintendo 64 is probably the one. I got someone who told me the other day, well, you wouldn't have a lot of options for games if you chose Nintendo 64, but I think that the quality of the games versus the quantity is more important to me.
absolutely. And like that's something Nintendo's always been good at. It was just like
Hmm.
co-op and just like team. Like I think their mission is more like get people together rather than everybody kind of sitting alone in their basement kind of thing.
That's what I get from Sony sometimes. Is a lot of the PlayStation games, in my opinion, at least the really good ones, are one player. I like Resident Evil, I like Silent Hill, that kind of stuff, where you're just one player going through a game, and that makes a lot of sense. PlayStation is more, I think, one player. Nintendo is more group oriented, and you have Xbox, which maybe a little bit of both. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because you've got Halo, but then you've also got some other good single player games. What's your favorite console of all time?
Probably the N64 that we're talking about.
Okay. Okay. All right.
It might be a bias because I grew up on that one,
Mm-hmm.
and because like a lot of my like Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, Mario Kart, the original Smash Bros, like they were all childhood favorites. So a little biased, I think.
Yeah, I think the N64 was the first console that I had that was kind of my own. I had a brother growing up, and we both kind of shared like a Nintendo, then a Super Nintendo, but then I got a Nintendo 64, and he also got one, so we both had one that was kind of separate. So that was the very first console for me. Are there any handheld consoles that you really enjoy? Because I'm not super into handheld consoles.
Yeah, probably the Game Boy Advance.
Okay.
And I think that's just another bias because like I grew up with one, but I never got into the DSs. I didn't have a Game Gear like other than that one now, but I had a Game Boy Advance growing up. Actually, it's right here. Yeah,
This is your childhood Game Boy Advance?
this is my childhood one. Yeah, I don't know if these
Okay.
guys are any good,
Okay.
but yeah, this is like many trips, like road trips with just this. So I put a backlit screen into it, so like these old eyes can see it better now. But
Yeah. There the one maybe handheld console that I really played other than Game Boy. So I had a Game Boy, and then I really didn't own any except I had a Game Gear growing up. And I don't know how you feel about the Game Gear, but it kind of flopped, I think. I mean, it was okay, but it hasn't really seen much I don't see a lot of interest from it today. Like people are like, "Oh, let me get that Game Gear." So,
it's growing, and I think it's because of the modding world that it's growing.
mhm.
Like this Game Gear has a backlit screen as well, like a new, like I guess it was backlit originally, but it's like an LCD screen. Now you can get like rechargeable batteries, USB-C charging, audio amps. They have the EverDrive, which is basically just it's like a cartridge that you put an SD card into, and you can play whatever game you want. So there's definitely a community for them, and they're slowly building up. For a while, that was like people laughed. They're calling me a Game Gear restoration because for like a 4 month period, that's the only thing I was getting in were just Game Gear repairs and mods.
I feel like when I search on eBay, I see a lot of, I look at consoles and stuff, but I see a lot of Game Gears doesn't work, needs fit, parts only, and that's the one system or console or handheld that I see that a lot on. So do they break very easily, or is it just because they're old?
Well, what it is the capacitors in them are notoriously bad. So I'd say like almost not 90%. Every single Game Gear I've ever gotten, I've replaced the capacitors on. I have like on my website in my store, I have capacitor kits for various systems. The best seller is the Game Gear capacitor kit, just because it's such a common fail point. I think it was just like a bad batch in that era. I think it was like late 90s of just bad capacitors. So like if you ever get a Game Gear that won't power on, has a dim screen, or no or low audio, probably got or
And you can fix that, correct?
absolutely. Yeah, it's like
All
one
right.
of my probably most experienced and common. Like if someone's like, "Can you replace capacitors?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do it with my eyes closed." Like I
Gotcha.
know which capacitor values at which without looking them up. So,
Excellent. Very good. Do you have a moment for gaming that's maybe like a very successful moment for you where there was a game that you struggled to beat forever and then you finally beat it? I always like to ask people that because I feel like everyone has their one moment.
they do absolutely, and I feel bad because I keep harping on Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, that's fine.
The Water Temple. Like, I played the Water Temple, and it was me and my buddy, because at the time I didn't have an N64. And we got stuck, and we put the game away for, like, years.
Oh,
and
wow.
then when I got my own, I replayed it, and when I beat the Water Temple by myself, I'm like, holy, I was like, I've never been past this part, and I'm like, it's a whole new game for me now. And I just remember being like, that's incredible. Like, this is so exciting.
It's different definitely playing a game, now that we are older than when we were younger. And for me, one of those games was the Ninja Turtles game for NES. That game was so hard, so difficult. The underwater level with the seaweed, and
Yeah.
for whatever reason I could never beat that game. And recently, well, not recently, maybe a couple years ago, I finally beat it back when I was in college, and so it was quite the moment. I did use an emulator, I will admit, so I had save states, but still, it was still very hard, very hard.
I had to do that with The Legend of Zelda 2, because that's, to me, a super, super hard game. So it wasn't until it came out on the Switch where you could have save states that I was like, okay, I think I can actually play this now.
Right. Yes, games are so much harder back then without being able to save. Is there anything you're playing right now? Any current game you're working through?
Not really. I just beat, as silly as it is, the Lego Zero Dawn Horizon.
Oh, okay.
I played it through with my daughter, because I just played like the Forbidden West or Forbidden Wilds, I think. Or is it Forbidden West? I can't remember.
Is that on Switch?
The Lego one is. The Horizon one was PC and PlayStation. So I just beat that. I'm playing like a little bit of Phasmophobia, which is just like a PC kind of scary game. And then Super Monkey Ball on the Switch, because I found it like in a discount bin. I played that on GameCube years ago, so I was like, oh, let's replay that. That was good.
So is it the same game that was on GameCube, or is it different?
No, it is a different one. Definitely easier. It's either easier or my hand-eye coordination's better.
Yeah, that could be. That was one of the first games I think I had on the GameCube was Super Monkey Ball, and
Yeah, we put so many hours into that.
Yeah, that was a great game. Good game. So if people want to, like you said, reach out, there's places to get a hold of you. What sort of social media accounts do you have, or where are you involved online?
So I'm pretty much everywhere. If it's a social media platform, I at least have an account. Don't necessarily post on it. So my main ones, TikTok, YouTube, are both video game restoration. Instagram, video game restoration. I'm technically on X as VGR for life, and that's like the number 4 and life with a Y, because it wouldn't fit VGR.
So video game restoration was too big, essentially.
Yeah, and then I just tried like VG restoration or like VGR that was taken. So I was like, you know what? It's like I don't really plan on using this. So
Yeah.
those are the main ones. I did briefly make an account on, was it Red Note, when TikTok was under the threat of being banned.
Okay.
So I had like 2 videos there, but we're back for now, yeah. Yeah, surprisingly, that username wasn't taken anywhere.
That's good.
To this date. Like, I'm still like, that's weird. I don't know how I got that.
And what's on that website other than contacting you to get things fixed? What other things can people find on the website?
So I have a shop, rather. Various video game parts. I don't have a lot on there. But basically, whenever I use a part, once I test to make sure it works, I'll buy a bunch of them and put them on my website. That way, I have a stock of them, and if anybody else needs them. My biggest seller is a lid switch for the GameCube. A common fault point in a GameCube is the lid switch breaks, and the only way to replace it is to buy an authentic one. And the authentic prices were always going up because there's only so many of them. So I made like a third party one, if you will, that uses magnets. So in theory, it shouldn't break, and it's way less than buying an authentic one.
So lid switch is the button you hit that causes the lid to rise up. Is that what you're talking about?
No, sorry. So you hit the button that rises up, but there's like a little trigger inside the lid, and when that lid opens, the trigger depresses basically a switch, and that tells the system that the lid is open, and basically tells it not to run. So when the switch gets broken, it would read it as always open, so you couldn't play your GameCube anymore.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I definitely learned a lot about fixing things, a lot about some other games I hadn't heard about in a long time. Do you happen to still have my Superman game, or what became of it? I guess I'm just curious.
I still have it.
Yeah.
As another last Hail Mary, I might order a PCB or a motherboard and just see if that works. And if not, it's up to you. If you want me to send it back, it's entirely in your court.
Yeah, just let me know. Just let me know. But I have faith in you. I think you can do it. I believe in you.
I'll keep playing with it until I know for sure it's absolutely dead.
Excellent. Well, everyone, make sure you follow Video Game Restoration on all of his social media. Make sure you visit his website. If you need anything fixed, he's the guy. I mean, I've seen a lot of his videos. I have the utmost confidence in him being able to fix things, even though he couldn't fix the Superman, but I think that one was just long gone.
I try my best.
Yeah, definitely. Try his best. It's free. What's it hurt? It's free, so it's perfect. But again, thanks for coming. Anything left that you want to say to people that might be watching?
The only thing I can say to people is just know that your retro systems can be saved. They're not garbage just yet. Like, if it's either me or anybody else, or if you want to try it yourself, you can definitely save them from the landfill and then bring back those memories.
Perfect. That's all. Yeah, we definitely need more consoles instead of less, with these prices the way they're going too. So, but again, everybody, thanks for watching. This was a great episode, and we'll catch you next time on Video Game Collectors on Call.
Thanks, Doc.